Okay. Just realized that I didn't hit record, and there was just such a great discussion between the three of us about this stuff that stresses us out is the stuff that's in our head, the stories we tell ourselves. So we got Elaine and Mary on the call right now. Anything you want to add that you realized during that discussion we just had, either of you?
Like we said, it's just the more that we focus in on our personal thinking and we stay in our head, that's what causes the anxiety or the stress because of, being stuck in the past and the trauma, drama, whatever you want to call it. And we don't need to go there anymore. We just don't.
And after hearing your story, it made me realize that my complaining about the stress and anxiety of my job, doing more than one person's job, was basically all in my head. Because once I started doing the job and realized that, hey, I can do this, it can get done, it doesn't need to be stressful. It just means it needs to get done. So it was a good eye-opening awakening for me.
That's so great. Yes. And if there were 5 people doing that job, it would get done faster than one person doing it. That's just common sense. But what's so common in the workforce today is when one person is doing more than one person's job, they freak themselves out, they speed up, and trying to do the work of more than one person. You can't. You can only do the work of one person. You only have 2 eyes, 2 ears, 2 hands, 10 fingers, hopefully. You got all those things, all those parts, 1 brain. So it's the expecting ourselves to do more than what we are capable of. We have a limited capacity as a human.
Exactly.
It doesn't mean that there's something wrong with us. It just means we're human.
Yes, we are.
Isn't that interesting how it's that simple? It's really that simple. Wow, I'm so glad that you brought that up, Mary, because it's for everybody. Everybody. I know I certainly did that. Oh, the beatings I put myself through in my own head. They're all stories. Like, I love what you said, Elaine, the trauma drama.
Yes.
The trauma drama that we're creating now. Are there traumas? People at war, soldiers, people being abused by spouses, parents. I mean, it's horrific. However, when they're not thinking about it, they're fine. They're fine. And I don't mean, you shove it under the rug. You never think about it. It's natural. When it comes up, you think about it, but don't drag yourself through the mud overthinking it. It comes up, it's in your screen and your mind, and then you notice something else, and your mind is on that something else. I'll say one more thing, and then we can go over to a Sidvid, which is, it's so fascinating, isn't it, that when something is not in our mind, there's no way we can be affected by it. It's like total impossibility. And we can't make something not be in our mind. When it's in our mind, it's in our mind. However, we get the feeling when we're overthinking it, when we're extending that awful memory, that, scary thought that we're not going to be able to keep up.
Yeah.
The Ethel and Lucy
Yeah.
It's classic. Ethel and Lucy at the assembly line at the candy making factory. I can't
Yes.
keep up with
Yeah.
all that somebody sped up the candies and then the chocolates are just fly down the assembly line and they're trying to keep up and Lucy's putting she can't get in the box fast enough, so she's putting them in her pockets, her mouth. It's such a funny scene. I gotta
Yes.
find that and post that on our Facebook group. It's just so funny trying to keep up with life. Yeah, yeah. And to our credit, that's the good in us, right? That's the good in us that cares, that wants to do the right thing, that wants to be our best.
Yeah.
And the good in us gets stampeded on by us
Yep.
overthinking it,
Mhm.
trying to be superhuman when, you know, we can be grateful that we are human and we're doing the best we can.
Mhm.
Yeah. So you ready for a little Sid? I'm
Yes.
going to share my screen with the sound. Remember how long it took me to figure that one out, right?
It's okay. I'm trying to figure out how to mute right now.
Yeah, I gotta go on mute too. So, yeah, 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 yeah. So much going on here. Where I had it, but I couldn't. Oh, I had it right here. There it is. Yeah. So this is it's a little over 20 minutes. It's the Salt Spring Island interview. I thought that would be, it was like at the end of that new page on 3PGC with a bunch of new Sid stuff, including, check this out. I never saw this. This ad, when you click on it, it's beautiful. The Great Spirit. This is a book. This is the first I hear about this. When I go to buy the book, it's not available yet. I can't wait to find out. Is this the book that Judy is finishing? Is this the book that Keith Blevins is finishing for Sid? Sid gave 2 manuscripts that were undone before he passed away. And I love this title. That's the Native Americans call God, the universe, what Sid called mind with a capital M. The word for that is the Great Spirit. I love that. And I had some exposure to Native American traditions. That's another story. Someday I'll tell it. And this is a dream catcher. It's beautiful. You can find them in a lot of like new age kind of bookstores. They're just beautiful. People hang them on somewhere in their bedroom. It's
Yes.
supposed to like catch their dreams.
Yep. Yes, I have them in my kids' rooms.
Cool. What do you know about them, Elaine?
Yes, I do know a lot about them. They're in my children's rooms. They each have one.
Wow. Each have one. So anything you want to add to what that's about? So we can look.
Well, when they were kids, they were doing some activities with Girl Scouts and Boy Scouts. So they were learning how to actually make them. So they made their dream catchers and they've had them ever since. And basically, they're using them to, it started off when they were talking about their dreams and what kind of sometimes, it's part of it being in their head about, nightmares and negative thoughts. So the hope is having these will kind of give you a sense of peace and positivity and, creating a sense of spirituality for yourself and getting out of your head and being more mindful and being at peace when you're resting. So they loved them. And so they've had them ever since.
Oh, yeah, they're beautiful and
Yes,
meaningful. And meaningful,
very,
true that. Yeah,
very meaningful.
for peace and quiet and catch the
Yes,
negativity to, yeah.
yes,
Catch it and let it, yeah, and let it float on through because dream
exactly.
catchers have all these spaces, right? Between the feathers and the beads and the yarn
Yes,
that keeps it all together, or
yes,
rope in different cases. Yeah.
yes.
All right, here we go with the interview.
What is it that you've discovered?
Well, Shane, what I discovered 34 years ago is miraculous, to say the least. And I was blessed with the gift that was given to me. And what I found out, there was three divine principles: divine mind, divine consciousness, and divine thought. And they are the three principles that hold the secret to all human experience. And I realized when I first found them, if psychology and psychiatry could understand this, it would change psychology and put it into another dimension altogether. They cover everything in this world, the entire psychological experience, because this is what life is. From the cradle to the grave, it's a psychological experience.
Mm-hmm.
It's all brought about by using mind, consciousness, and thought. And without these principles, there wouldn't even be life. And they're the Trinity. There can't be any more because they're the Trinity. They're the total essence of all life here on earth.
Could you once again talk about the three principles and what they are and what they mean?
Well, let's put it this way. I'll digest the story and we'll go back 34 years ago and I'll tell you the story, how it happened. And maybe this will help you. I remember I was sitting in the living room reading the paper, the newspaper, and I stood up to tell my late wife something. And instead, I looked out the picture window at the ocean, and it was like being sucked down a tunnel, literally sucked down a tunnel. And all of a sudden, I was shrouded by white buzzing light. And I went beyond time, space, and matter, beyond this world, and realized that all life was a great illusion created from this formless energy. Then I don't know how many seconds it took, but this light vanished, and I turned around and started to cry. And I said to my late wife, I'm home, I'm free, I've made it, I've conquered this world. Now that was a very unusual thing for me to say. Well, that's what happened, but you can imagine Barbara's face. It was like I'd shot her. She thought I'd gone off my head. But since then, everything I said has become a fact. I know it sounds strange. As a matter of fact, when I first found this, 3 days later, I went back to my work. And unknown to me, I'd changed so much that nobody knew me. My voice was different. My face was different. The way I talked was different. The way I acted was different. And I never realized it. But one thing I did realize, and it was interesting, is when I went back into the work, there was maybe 400 people, I saw every single one of them working from these principles. And if they were using those principles negatively, then they were unhappy people, or sad people, or disturbed people. And the ones that were using them in a positive way, they were the happy ones. It's because those principles, how you use them, dictates your whole outcome in life.
You wouldn't be alive if you weren't using them. You're using them all the time. You just have to understand that you are.
You are using them all the time, but you're using them wrongly sometimes. Sometimes you're using them correctly. But if you know what they are, then you can go around and change your life. And why it happened to me, I have no idea. Because to be truthful with you, I was definitely most undeserving, but it did happen. And that's what you call self-realization. You realize how you are connected to this world. You realize what some people call the oneness of life. You realize that everything becomes from a divine, formless, spiritual energy before creation. And when this formless, divine energy takes form, we call it creation. Well, you go further, the whole world is an illusion. The second we leave our mother's womb, we start using those three principles, mind, conscious, and thought, to see creation. The second we do that, we're into our intellect and we lose this wisdom that was deep in our soul before birth. And the idea is to go back and claim this wisdom. That's why the great mystics have always told you, look within for the answer. It's not out there. Out there is the illusion. This is what we blame for our problems. Then we create more problems. But if you look inside, you find the wisdom. Once you find the wisdom, you become wiser. It's like we're helping business people. We don't know anything. I don't know anything about business. I'd never even try. I don't have to. If I'm trying to help a businessman, I would try and get him to find his own wisdom. Then when he finds it, he becomes a wise businessman. And that goes for any profession in the world. You're not telling them what to do, you're making them wiser. And this is what these three principles do. As I say, they're the trinity to all human experience here on earth. They're the essence, they're the lost secret that the psychologists and psychiatrists have been looking for since day one. And I realize they've been taught certain things. And I know it's difficult to believe, but you see, what they were taught was from the outside to go inside and make you better. And that's not it. The secret lies when you realize the wisdom you seek is inside, then you go outside and change it. That's the difference. It's so simple, and yet it's so profound. And people think, well, I know all about mind, conscious, and thought because intellectually I can see it. But that's not it. My pet parrot could say mind, conscious, and thought, but the parrot wouldn't know anything about it. And they'll say, well, come to an end once you realize that. That's not true. If you start talking about the principles, you could talk forever because they cover everything in this world. You could never come to the end of discussing the three principles. It'd go into psychology, psychiatry, philosophy, theosophy. It would go into mysticism. It would go into physics, neuroscience. It's got the ultimate answer. Now, I don't know anything about physics because I only had a grade 9 education. But after this experience, I knew I'd found the ultimate answer that the physicists were looking for. And consequently, I've been invited down to the States quite a few times to talk to some of the best physicists, and they always want me to explain why it is I say time, space, and matter are all an illusion. And what the puzzle was, they were talking about the already formed energy in this world. And what I'm talking about is the divine formless energy before it is created into this world. But after I was finished, two of them came up to me and said, you know, Sid, we don't have a clue what you're talking about, but we know you know. And I thought that was a beautiful thing to say. And someday I'd love to go back again. It is. It's a divine illusion, suspended within the boundaries of time, space, and matter. And time, space, and matter are all illusionary. I know it was a miracle that happened to me. There's no other way I could express it. Because how can a grade 9 educated welder who has hardly read anything in his life know immediately that he was qualified to go into any university in the world and talk about all these different subjects? I mean, there's something there. And that's what they'll have to look at. Because my time on this earth is limited. And I'd love to see it go out. My advice was to get a book or a tape, and you don't need anything else because you're getting it straight from the horse's mouth, so to speak. There's nobody contaminating it, telling you that there's 4 principles, 7 principles, or role play, or techniques. They're all from the intellect. Now, I remember many years ago, this monk with all his robes and everything came to see me on the island. And he listened, and he wasn't getting anywhere. And he was a very unhappy man. And he told me that his life wasn't worth living. And he said to me, but there's something puzzles me. Why did you decide to put it out into psychology rather than spiritual? And I said, well, I did put it spiritual. He says, no, you didn't. You're putting it through psychology and psychiatry. I said, no, it's only part of it. Didn't I tell you that all life is a psychological experience? He says, yes. He says, but that doesn't answer my question. Why did you say mind, conscious, and thought? And I said, well, tell me something. What is the only thing in this world that could be divine mind? And he thought for a while, then he said, God. And I said, well, what is the only thing in this world that can be divine consciousness? He said again, God. And I said, well, what is the only thing in this world that can be divine thought? He says, God. I said, well, how much more spiritual can you get? But he never got it. And to this day, he's still searching all over the world for the truth. And here he was standing listening to it, and he didn't recognize it. But that's okay, because he wasn't ready. And people will say, well, what makes you ready? You make yourself ready. When you're ready, you will hear it. If you never get ready, you won't hear it. You might have to go to another lifetime and start all over again. But when you're ready, the truth will be there for you, no matter where you are. You know, see, people, they go to India and they search for truth. They go to China and search for truth. They go up the Himalayas and search for truth. They'll never find it. Never. You know where you find it? You look in the mirror and you say, aha, It lies inside. And once you see that, your search is finished. There's no place to search. I've had so-called enlightened people come to me, see many, many times to see me. And the second they got off that boat, I knew that they weren't. You know why? Because they were enlightened, supposedly, but they were still searching for the truth outside. They only thought they were. There's that thought again, eh? Whatever you think the world is, that's what the world is to you. Whatever you think you believe, that's your belief system. It's all thought. If you think you're a sad person, you're going to be a sad person. If you think you're a happy person, you're going to be a happy person. The thought creates the deeds.
How have you seen this philosophy of these principles reach out and change the world already?
Oh, they've changed thousands of people's lives. Personally, I've seen hundreds of people change before my eyes. People that were neurotic, psychotic, they were bulimic, anorexic, all different kinds of things. And I've seen them all change. And more than that, the beautiful thing is it changed a lot of therapists throughout the world. And when they found this, they threw away all their old training, started to work with the principles, and they started to see miracles in their offices. They saw cures that they never thought possible. People who have been in therapy for many, many years and told by the psychiatrists and psychologists that they would never be mentally healthy. And quite often they go back to the therapist and say, I don't need you anymore. I just read this book, or I just listened to this man called Sydney Banks. And they'll say, that's impossible. And they want to give them more treatment, but they'll walk away. Do you know what's happened? Because they have jumped ahead of the therapist. And this is how powerful this is. And this is why I say, if the therapists of the world ever really start to take this, there'd be healings all over the world. I've been in a jail where there was 300 people, and every single one of them was carrying that book, The Enlightened Gardener. And I heard so many stories, it was unbelievable. I heard one story. Now, this girl wasn't in jail, but I met her there because she's now a teacher. And her story was fantastic. When she was young, a young lady, she got abducted by a policeman. And she got tied up, she got raped, she got beaten. Now, finally, the police found them and she was released. But then she had to go for medical help for quite a few years. And she was in and out of hospitals. She had every kind of treatment known to man. And she showed me a letter where the hospital sent her, signed by a psychiatrist, saying that she would never be mentally healthy and she'd need help all her life. Now, when I walked into that jail, she came up to me and she hugged me and thanked me. And really, I didn't even know what she was talking about. But then she told me the story. And I'll tell you something, it was unbelievable. And that lady now is so healthy that she's become a teacher. She teaches the 3 principles to other prisoners. And all those therapists that have changed, they've told me that what they were doing didn't work. And now they're thrilled. They love their work, whereas before they were all cracking up. They're all leaving their profession. But now they go to work and they love it because they know they're helping people. Now that's quite different. That's really quite different.
Maybe one last thing is, what's your hope for humanity? What's your hope for the world?
Well, my hope for humanity is that the level of consciousness rises. See, nobody can change this world. I've said many times, for the world to change, the consciousness of humanity has to be elevated. Because right now, the conscious state of the world is in a deplorable condition. And this is why there's wars, atrocities, killings, etc., etc. And it's going to get worse. Believe me, it's going to get worse. Unless the consciousness rises. And I've had therapists that will argue with me and say, hey, Sid, just a minute. We've had conscious raising seminars for years and they don't work. No, they didn't. They weren't raising the consciousness. They were telling you what you do with your consciousness. And if you ever realize the difference between what you do with it and the true nature of consciousness, then that elevates you, your consciousness. Then when you look out into the world, it looks different. And that's what people have to do in mass, is lift their level of consciousness, they look outside and see a different world, then their world will change.
Wow. Ooh, I forgot to stop the recording. Wow. Right? I just couldn't stop it because, we went the full 20 minutes. Hi, Stuart. Good to see you.
Hi.
Oh, man. I had seen that several times before, but I never heard everything I heard this time. I don't know about the rest of you. I think, what he said is so true. It's all, and we have all experienced what he's talking about
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
in this recording. It was a full 20 minutes, so it's longer than what I usually do, but I just couldn't bear to stop it. So I hope that was good for Mary's on. She's on walking, so she's on her phone with us.
Well, it's good to see you guys.
You
Yeah, and
too.
I'm glad you got in when he started talking about the prisoners,
Yes.
right?
Mhm.
I was
Perfect
like,
timing.
I can relate to that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm telling you, things happen that you can't even imagine. You can't even imagine what it would be like when you start something. And as you go through the process, you start to see and you start to see. And of course, along the way, you have questions like, am I doing this right? Am I in the right place? Am I doing the right thing? And if you kind of ignore those thoughts and let them just pass through and you stick with it, you stick with, inside that knowing that he's talking about, makes all the difference.
Wisdom guides you. And so interesting you just said that because that was the beginning of our conversation today.
Mm-hmm.
That it's so easy to get caught up in
Mhm.
overthinking things,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
fearful thinking, trying to keep up with the pace of what the boss is handing down and
Mm.
all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you realize, that's being conscious of where we're at, it comes in a feeling, right? Wouldn't you say that? You realize when you start thinking, can I do this? Should I be doing this? Blah, 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 all that stuff. And then you settle all that, you quiet all that down. Wisdom speaks. Yeah, of course you should be doing this.
Mm-hmm.
Or, you know, exit, turn left, or whatever wisdom speaks. Do any of you have a specific example of that? It'd help whoever is listening to this recording.
So many.
Yeah.
So many
Well,
examples.
give us one.
Well, I think you know my story with how I started the New York Peace Project, and I was doing it with my brother, and then he wasn't doing it with me anymore, and all those thoughts that were coming to me, like, oh my God, I can't do this. You know, who am I kidding? You know, they talk about imposter syndrome. I mean,
Mhm.
I'm like the poster child for imposter syndrome. That's the way I feel sometimes. I have to laugh at myself because, and I'm starting to realize that what nonsense that really is. You know, it really is just my thoughts. If I really listen to my thoughts, I would be curled up in my bed over here with the covers
Mhm.
over my head. I'd be like, who are you kidding? Just forget it. But the feeling is that it's indescribable when you do have those thoughts going through your head and that feeling that it gives you. It's such a lousy feeling. And yes, we feel our thoughts, right?
Mhm.
We feel our thoughts. And sometimes it's really, really ugly and really upsetting. And then you realize, no, that's not what I am. That's not who I am. You know, and you just realize that you can do anything, anything.
You know what really strikes me, Stuart, about you working with prisoners in prisons is that you love it. The way you describe it, you have this way of connecting with them. They connect with you as a result. You see the health in them, you speak to the health in them, and you see miracles happening. They're changing in front of your eyes. They'll come out with things like, I can't believe I had to come to jail to gain my freedom, freedom from my own thinking.
Yes,
Mhm.
I've heard
I
them
mean,
say
how
that many times.
powerful.
Yes. It
Yeah,
just so happens that the group of guys that I work with, I think they're already at a certain level. You know, I don't want to give myself too much credit, but because it's not about me.
right,
But it just
right.
so happens that the place that I go into and the program that they're in already is already pointing in this direction. So now I'm just coming in and saying, keep going
Yeah,
in that direction.
yeah.
That's what I'm doing. You know, but I'm also working with a different group of people that maybe that's not necessarily the case, and maybe they're a little bit more stuck in the past. But even with those people, I'm starting to see things that they're changing. And so it gives me hope that this is for everybody. This is for everybody and anybody. Okay. As long as I'm coming from my place of knowing, my feeling, and that's what Sid talks about, the
Mhm.
feeling. You know, people can tell. People can tell when there's something off. And somehow, some way, when I get into those situations and I get into that workshop, everything else is left at the door. My whole world of thought is left at the door. And it's like I'm an open vessel.
Mhm.
And and you guys are shaking your head because you know what I'm talking about,
Yep.
right?
Mhm.
Because
Mhm.
you guys work one-on-one. I haven't done that yet, but I mean, I talk to people before and after the groups, and they're always coming up to me and talking to me. And, you know, this is something that I realized has been happening all throughout my life, is people always gravitate towards me and talk to me. And I was like, why is this? Why is that happening? And maybe it's because I've known parts of the three principles all throughout my life. It's just was never like, I don't know, it was never really understood or described. So it was just part of me and people could tell. I don't know. I don't know. It's and you know, I talk to my mother sometimes, and she says the same thing to me, and I see it. You know, sometimes I don't see it, but there are times when I do see it when she tells me how she interacts with people and how they start telling her their story, and okay, that's I guess, you know, that's something I must have seen in my growing up, right? Without even realizing it.
Mhm.
So long, oh, who is it that just left?
Mary.
Oh, okay.
We had to leave. Yeah, it's the end of her lunch
Elaine,
time.
Elaine, you know, I told Lori what you told me. Remember when we broke out into
Oh yeah, you did. She
about the
wanted to
book?
know.
Oh my God. You know, I still haven't gotten the book. All right. I've been very busy, but that's on my to-do list to get that book and just read it, just to
Mhm.
refresh my memory about the book. And then now that I know your story, I'm going to be like even more
Mhm.
amazed about it.
Jonathan Livingston Seagull, right? Is
Yeah.
that the
Yeah.
name of it? Because I remember reading that way back in my 20s, and maybe it's small. Maybe
Yes.
we will have that as part of the book club,
Okay.
right?
Sure.
Yes. Yes.
And knowing what we know about the principles, I bet we will see so much more in that little book.
Oh,
Mhm.
I guarantee it. I'm pretty
Yes.
sure. And I haven't read it in many years also. I think I was,
Mhm.
God, how old was I? Yeah, I think I was in my 20s, you know.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's about when it came out. I think you're right. It had just come out when
Yeah.
back then.
Yeah. So, yeah,
Mhm.
it's
10 years ago, right? No, I'm
oh
kidding.
yes, 10 years ago.
You
Mhm.
know, I just want to make one point for before we shut off the recording, which is you said something that was so right on. Well, a lot of things that were right on, Stuart, but I, what people gravitate to you and others who are not in their imposter syndrome. The imposter syndrome is when people think that they're supposed to be something than they are.
Something right.
There's no imposter when we're just being ourselves
Right.
and admitting, gee, I don't know that part of the job, which I didn't do. I was a waitress when I was in college to help put myself through college. I was a waitress. And someone in my dorm was a seasoned waitress, and she asked if I could help out, not knowing that I had zero waitressing experience. And my parents did not bring me to highfalutin restaurants. This was a highfalutin restaurant, the Tivoli. Some of you may know of it in New Haven. Sophia Loren owned part of this restaurant. I get to
Mhm.
this restaurant. I was probably dressed thinking it's like McDonald's. I knew nothing. I didn't know how to serve oysters. I didn't know what side of the table. I have no idea the mess that I must have left behind me. I could look back and laugh now, but I was like in a panic. I don't know how to do this.
Oh wow.
It's not just taking an order but had I known that it's perfectly okay and acceptable to let whoever's in charge know that you don't have this experience, you don't know how to do this. And you come in with what you do know. Like Stuart, he doesn't have
Yeah.
degrees in how to work with prisoners.
No,
Right? I mean, there
no.
is a degree for that. It's called probation officer, right? Or whoever. But he just walks in being a person, a humble human,
Yeah.
person to person. How can I serve? How can I help?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
so simple. It's
Yeah.
our own thinking, our own minds that complicate it.
Did I ever tell you the story about the letter of support that I wrote for somebody?
Tell it. I remember, but I could hear it again, and I'd love for Elaine to hear it and whoever's listening.
So, you know, I'm doing the class with Mark and we finished. And I think shortly after Mark left. Maybe it was in March of this year. So this one of the guys, he's actually the in this dorm. It's a dorm style, so it's medium security. So
Mhm.
they have two guys. They were like leaders of the house. They would facilitate programs. They were like the leaders of I think it was about 50 guys. So him and I got friendly. This particular guy, he was in for murder one. He did 20 years and he's going up for parole. I think it was the second time he's going up for parole. So I'm kind of new to this, and I kind of felt like I don't know if I should or shouldn't because I don't really know him that well, that long, and is it appropriate? I had all these questions in my mind, but I said yes. I said I would do it, and I always like to keep my word, right? That's important to me. So I said, okay, I'll do it. Because I even talked to him. I said, I don't know you that well and this and that. He said, listen, you don't have to make it a big deal. It's, if you want to, great. And so then I said, okay, I'll do it because he kind of convinced me. So I go online and I'm doing research about, how to write a letter of support. There's actually something where there's some lawyers that do some pro bono work and they set up this whole thing and there was actually a sample letter there. So I looked at the sample letter and I think I did a pretty good job. I wrote the letter and um, I sent it to wherever it was I was supposed to send it, and then I made a copy and I brought it to him. He loved it. He really loved it. Okay, and that made me feel good. So time goes by and he was obviously very happy about it, and now he's out on parole. He's out. I've actually talked to him. I'm probably going to see him soon, and he's we're definitely uh, continuing the relationship. So anyway, uh, I don't know, maybe a month or two later, two more guys come into the workshop that we're doing. Now, one guy had been there a while, and another guy had just started to come. And the second guy was like a monster, right? And he's like 6'3", built, and talks a certain way that's kind of loud and intimidating. But obviously, I know, look, he's got his experience. He's here for the same reason the other guys are. Okay, fine. So both of these guys approached me to write a letter of support. And one of them, just as I'm walking out the door to leave, and something inside me said, listen, I don't know you that long. It's not something that I necessarily really want to do for everybody. I have to have the feeling for it. And, I was taking a chance. I mean, I had to speak my truth, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
And I mean, it wasn't like a hard no, okay?
Mhm.
But it was kind of letting him know where I was at. And then the following week um, is actually 2 weeks because I go every other week. So I said to myself, man, what am I going to do? How am I going to take care of this situation? Because I don't want to go in there every other week or whatever I'm going to do and feel like I have pressure to write letters of support. That's not why I'm there. I'm
Yeah.
there to bring this workshop to help them, you know, see what they have already inside them, right? And I was going to talk to my friend Judah and get some kind of counseling on it, and I never did. And I'm all on the way up there, and I'm saying to myself, I'm going to have to be honest with these guys, okay?
Mhm.
So in the beginning, I hemmed and hawed a little bit, and then finally I said, listen, guys, here's the deal. You guys don't need my letters of support. You don't need my letters of support. You're already doing the work that you need. You have everything you need.
Mhm.
Okay. And I was honest with them. I said, I'm new to this. I'm learning as I go. I said yes to Eric, and I did the letter, but it's not a thing that I want to have like a responsibility to do.
Mhm.
And so I told them all this, and I wasn't sure what their response was going to be, but they both were mostly very receptive. And the guy that I wrote the letter for at the end of the class in front of everybody said, apologize to me for putting me in that position. Now, I wasn't going there expecting an apology,
Yeah.
but that made me feel good. And it also helped me to know that I did do the right thing.
Yeah.
I did do the right thing because I
Yes.
listened. I really listened to my heart. And the next week, another guy apologized to me. The really big guy, the burly guy, he hasn't come to a meeting since. So, hey, what are you gonna do?
Yes.
You know, and
Mhm.
and that's an experience where there was a lot going on here. There was a lot going,
Yeah.
a lot of fear, a lot of trepidation, and oh my God, how are these guys gonna receive it? And I was like, no, I'm just gonna do it. And that's the result.
Speak
Thank
from
you.
the heart.
Exactly. Yes. I
What were
was
you
going to
going to
say
say?
thank you for I was going to say thank you for sharing that story, because what you did is establish your boundaries. When you're in a group and you're working with individuals, you have to take care of yourself and listen to your heart, listen to your, the mindfulness of what you're doing, because you matter just as much as they do.
Right. And I felt like this is going to be a hindrance to me going forward if I don't share this and get this out
Yeah.
and talk to them about it.
Yeah.
And it's not like saying that they're wrong or they're bad or anything.
No.
I'm just telling how I feel and how I see it. And then I believe from the honesty of it, first of all, I
Yes.
think they respected me tremendously.
Yes.
Right.
Right.
Yes.
That's
Well,
it. Just telling what is true for you,
and
your
Yeah.
honesty.
I had this thought. I'm like, well, what if they get really upset and who knows, maybe they'll get violent and they'll kill me, right? It's just
Yeah.
that's where our mind goes, right?
Oh, yeah.
I'm just being honest.
Yeah.
And then I said to myself, you know what? Well, then so be it. If that's the way I go, that's the way I go.
Hmm.
Seriously,
Yeah.
that's what I
Yeah.
said to myself.
Boy,
Hmm.
talk about being assured, like wisdom. You knew that sharing with them that that's not your role, that's not your job. Maybe
Right.
you overstepped your boundaries writing this one letter of support, but
Right,
you want to do what you are there to do.
right.
Mhm.
Nobody hired you to write a letter of support.
No, it's
No
here.
problem that you
Getting paid
did.
for this.
You did it once, but then you realize, oh my God, they're coming out of the woodwork asking for letters of support, and that's not my role.
Right.
So the wisdom, that's what Sid was talking about in that
Yes.
recording. It's a great example of
Yeah.
what Sid was talking about. That raised levels of consciousness.
Hmm.
Hmm. Yes.
I'm
On that
sure.
note, I need to run. My client is here, so I need to run. Thank you, Stuart, for
Oh,
sharing that
yeah, we got
story.
to stop. We'll stop the recording.
Thank you. Thank